Today we have liberated virtually all of the territory from the grip of these bloodthirsty monsters. Now, as we work with our allies to destroy the remnants of ISIS, it is time to give our brave warriors in Syria a warm welcome home. The state of our union is strong. That sounds so good.
Mr. Chairman, I see that your 5 minutes is up, and so I'm...
You weren't supposed to do that.
European nations, including France, the UK, and Spain, joined the United States and most Latin American nations to officially recognize Juan Guaidó as the interim president of Venezuela. Unlike U.S. foreign policy in other places we've seen, like Syria or North Korea, the U.S. action in Venezuela has been methodical and largely in step with the rest of the international community. As the Colombians told me earlier last week, the effort for regime change started with Latin American nations, and the U.S. is joining the party already in progress. Special U.S. envoy Elliot Abrams said the U.S. is on, quote, Team Venezuela, and the State Department has thrown its full weight behind the interim president, even pledging $20 million in humanitarian aid, which is desperately needed in the country.
Venezuelan populist President Nicolás Maduro is sworn in for a second consecutive term, following elections deemed fraudulent by his opponents and much of the international community. Under his presidency, the country with the world's largest oil reserves has plunged into acute poverty. Hunger is widespread. Hospitals are crumbling. The most basic medicine is impossible to find, and children are dying from malnutrition and preventable diseases. This year, inflation is expected to surpass 3 million % at the current rate.
Many European nations are following the United States in backing Guaido as leading Venezuela. And in a recent interview, President Donald Trump continues to say that a military option is still on the table. RT Sarah Montez de Oca joins me. Sarah, a lot of people are very scared at the thought of a military operation of United States soldiers in Venezuela.
That's right, Scotty. Venezuela is now facing a political and a constitutional crisis. Today, 11 more European nations joined the U.S. in recognizing opposition leader Juan Guaidó as Venezuela's interim president. The move comes after Maduro refused to accept an ultimatum. Last week, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Spain gave Maduro until Sunday to call on new elections. Maduro said, "We don't accept ultimatums from anyone." Ironically, Maduro is calling for the National Assembly Parliament, which is opposition-controlled, to have early elections. Now, he declared there's no dictatorship in Venezuela, nor will there be. In an interview with Face the Nation, Donald Trump said the U.S. military force in Venezuela is still on the table, adding that he turned down a meeting with President Maduro several months ago.
As the crisis in Venezuela continues to escalate, President Nicolás Maduro is speaking out. An exclusive interview with RT, he says he believes there are some very obvious motives behind the United States' quest to replace him with an opposition leader. RT's Rachel Blevins has the story.
While dozens of countries are following the United States and publicly endorsing the overthrow of Venezuela's elected president, Nicolás Maduro told RT that he is not going down without a fight, and he is not deterred by the threat of a U.S. military invasion.
In Venezuela, there is going to be no war, no military intervention, which does not mean that we do not prepare to defend our land, which is sacred, that we do not prepare the whole system of weapons, the artillery system, missiles, the weapons. What is Donald Trump's casus belli against Venezuela? What is it? We don't have the weapons of mass destruction. We don't pose any security threat to them. The casus belli is the oil of Venezuela, the riches of Venezuela, its gold, gas, diamonds, iron, water, our material riches.
While the Trump administration has yet to respond to Maduro's comments, key figures such as National Security Advisor John Bolton have openly admitted that the U.S. government is working with corporations to take advantage of Venezuela's oil reserves if Maduro is overthrown.
Okay, so is the condemnation of Maduro also kind of a call for U.S. intervention in Venezuela?
Well, certainly it is. I mean, that's the propaganda is what clears the field for warfare. You start with propaganda. You start with demonizing the enemy. We've seen this over and over again, just the 21st century alone, with Saddam Hussein, with Gaddafi, with Assad. You first have to demonize the person, make him into the next Hitler, and then who in their right mind would oppose a U.S. liberation? This is exactly the path we're going down right now, yet again on Venezuela.
Well, that's my question for you, Daniel. You know, on one hand, you keep hearing there's a humanitarian crisis down in Venezuela, and there is definitely some issues that are hitting the country economically. But then on the other hand, you have John Bolton coming out there and saying, nope, this is about the oil. This is definitely about the oil.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is preparing his country for a possible military invasion.
Call on men to join this comprehensive national plan for the defense of sovereignty and peace. Love the country, and let that love become action. Defend the right to peace.
Trump administration officials maintain their stance that all options are on the table, including military force. Now, at the same time, they, along with opposition leader Juan Guaido, are demanding Venezuela open its borders to deliveries of so-called humanitarian aid.
I invite you all to participate in this great initiative in order to facilitate the quick entry of humanitarian aid. As you know, we are now in the collection phase. We saw the deployment in Cucuta, and in the coming days we will announce and install 2 additional points so that hundreds of volunteers can help facilitate the entry of this aid.
Now, much of this humanitarian aid talk has been focused on the Tienditas Bridge border crossing between Venezuela and Colombia. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo accused the Venezuelan government of closing the crossing to prevent humanitarian aid from entering the country. It was a claim echoed by mainstream media outlets from CNN to NPR. However, this photo from Google Maps shows the crossing has been closed at least since June of 2017. Meanwhile, the Venezuelan government has sent troops to reinforce the bridge crossing, and the president of the Red Cross Society has called on all parties to not politicize humanitarian aid. So for now, the scenario seems to have reached a stalemate.
Diplomatic relations between the United States and Venezuela are continuing to deteriorate tonight. The U.S. no longer recognizes Nicolas Maduro as president of that country. In response to that, Venezuela has ordered American diplomats to leave Venezuela. The U.S. has not complied. The Trump administration now says, quote, all options are on the table regarding Venezuela. Could this lead to a military conflict of some kind with that country?
Latest projections from the Brookings Institution, a Washington, D.C. think tank, are 8.2 million refugees and migrants may leave Venezuela. That is 25% of the current population. And now Russia, China, and Cuba are backing the Maduro regime.
Catherine Herridge, a story we will continue to follow. Thank you very much for that. Venezuela was once the richest nation in South America. Caracas is basically a first world city. Huge middle class, obviously massive oil reserves. And then that country got socialism. Now people are starving in Venezuela. Millions, as you just heard, have fled. The crime rate there is among the richest in the world. The income inequality also among the most profound globally. A small group of leaders have become even richer, everyone else impoverished. In other words, it didn't work.
In the capital, there's a queue for everything, everywhere. Hunger breeds a special kind of anger.
We have devastating sanctions on them! We have devastating sanctions on them! We're helping create that hunger. First of all, half of that, again, is because of our sanctions. And if that's what the Venezuelan people want, then we should respect their wishes. Because corporate media tells us this is what the people want, right? 86% of Venezuelans would disagree with international military intervention, and 81% oppose the U.S. sanctions that have gravely hurt the nation's economy. So most Venezuelans, So most Venezuelans don't know Guaido. Most Venezuelans still support Maduro. Whether you personally like him or not doesn't matter. And most Venezuelans don't want military intervention and don't want the U.S. sanctions. Yet CNN and NPR and Fox News and BBC and every other mainstream outlet will have you thinking everyone is starving to death and on their knees begging for America's freedom bombs to rain down like the dollar bills at a strip club. You know, because our interventions have worked so well in Syria and Yemen and Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan and Chile and Honduras and Haiti and Somalia and Libya and Guatemala and Colombia and Panama and Fraggle Rock and those tree forts where the fucking Ewoks live. They do it the same way with every country. I found out they recently made this one about the United States. Walking through America's streets, we witnessed the world's worst poverty crisis. At the stores, thousands tackle each other for the last remaining products. This is what capitalist utopia looks like. We're the only ones not picking through garbage. Are the members of Congress. Here, hundreds of thousands celebrate the impending collapse of the capitalist government.
In Venezuela, the Maduro government has blocked a bridge that connects the country to Colombia as humanitarian aid was just about to arrive. We used a drone to get these images of an orange oil tanker and two large blue containers positioned across the three-lane bridge. It blocks the vital aid from entering, with the Maduro regime saying, "We are not beggars."
Well, as the United States continues to claim that its attempts to deliver humanitarian aid to the people of Venezuela have been blocked by the government, U.S. Special Envoy Elliot Abrams is now speaking out and calling for President Nicolas Maduro to leave his country.
While Guaido calls for humanitarian assistance for the people of Venezuela, Maduro continues to block unhindered access to international humanitarian assistance and denies Venezuelans the basic necessities they direly need unless they declare loyalty to him.
However, Venezuela has accused the U.S. of attempting to smuggle dozens of firearms and ammunition into the country. And this is not Abrams' first time supporting an opposition group in another country. The official in charge of the United States humanitarian aid program for the rebels in Nicaragua claimed that in 1986 he ordered his planes to shuttle weapons for the Contras in Central America at the direction of Abrams, who was an assistant secretary of state. Abrams was later convicted of lying to Congress about his role in financing rebels in Nicaragua. He was then pardoned by former President George H.W. Bush in 1991. And Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is also speaking out about the current situation. He told Fox Business that the militant group Hezbollah is active in Venezuela today and poses a threat to the United States.
People don't recognize that Hezbollah has active cells. The Iranians are impacting the people of Venezuela and throughout South America. We have an obligation to take down that risk for America.
The European Union's foreign policy chief said that the international coalition did not come up with an exact plan of action, but they are calling for a transparent election and claiming the goal is to find solutions that avoid violence and foreign intervention. While the U.S. calls for him to flee the country, President Maduro is standing firm. And in an open letter to Washington, he accused the Trump administration of wanting to invade Venezuela, not for freedom and democracy, but for control of the country's resources. Maduro has also claimed today that he is calling out the EU to work with the government of Venezuela in an attempt to pursue peace.
We only ask for an opportunity for peace, like the John Lennon song. With John Lennon, we ask from Venezuela to the European Union an opportunity for peace, to dialogue, and to be listened to.
Socialist policies have turned that nation from being the wealthiest in South America into a state of abject poverty and despair.
Mire, es una guerra, Orla, por favor. Le pido a Dios que te ilumine. Es una guerra política del imperio estadounidense, de los intereses de la extrema derecha que hoy gobierna, del Ku Klux Klan que gobierna la Casa Blanca para apoderarse de Venezuela, y han posicionado una estrategia política, comunicacional, diplomática, guerrerista para apoderarse de Venezuela.
Do you really think the Ku Klux Klan are ruling America?
Pienso que el sector extremista de los supremacistas blancos del Ku Klux Klan dirigen los Estados Unidos. Creo que es una pandilla.
Is President Trump a white supremacist?
Lo es pública, abiertamente, y ha estimulado a las corrientes fascistas, neofascistas, neonazis dentro de Estados Unidos, dentro de Europa, en América Latina. Es un sector extremista que desprecian al mundo, nos ven como menos, porque solamente creen en sus propios intereses y en los intereses de los Estados Unidos. Así que en la batalla que estamos dando por Venezuela, te lo digo, es una batalla que va más allá de nuestro país. Yo le hago un llamado a los pueblos del mundo a despertar, a abrir los ojos, a ver que es una agresión contra un país pacifista, que Venezuela tiene problemas como tienen muchos países del mundo, pero solo en paz nosotros mismos podemos resolverlo. Y que si se quiere de verdad ayudar a Venezuela, apoyen la paz. Díganle no a la intervención, díganle fuera las manos de Estados Unidos de Venezuela, y apoyen que Venezuela en su propio esfuerzo, a través del diálogo, resolvamos nuestros problemas.